an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Season 4, Episode 2. I am ashamed. No punctuation. In this episode, Rebecca's history becomes front page news, and in her shame, she becomes a little agoraphobic, and then invents a ghost. Or does she? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Megan for commissioning this episode. So I watched this episode before I went on my vacation with Owen, and it was a really nice, way to leave a nice spot to start my little break, because I was a little worried that we were going to end the episode on a massive cliffhanger of some other kind. And I was going to have to go 2 weeks without watching anymore, which, I mean, compared to some of the long breaks, wouldn't be that bad. But, I would rather avoid it. And this was actually a pretty good little self-contained story. And also, y'all know how much I fucking love Halloween. I mean, I love Christmas too, but Halloween just has a special place in my heart. And I don't feel like there has been a Halloween-themed episode in any other season. Correct me if I'm wrong. There was a Christmas-themed one in the first season, and there was a whole Christmas in Covina song. But this was a really fun one because I thought that they actually managed to incorporate the idea of a ghost and the being haunted by shit that you yourself did really, really well. And this is something that as you get older, I think you just relate to more and more. When you're younger, of course, there are going to be things that embarrass you, but oftentimes what embarrasses you is something sort of happening to you or somebody saying something to you that humiliated you. And as you get older, it's much more you being ashamed of your own actions or what you've said to somebody. Guys, I can't even tell you how many times throughout just today I did the cringe thinking about, I was involved in my own cleaning and doing various prep stuff around the house while I listened to audiobooks. And it's so funny how a completely sort of off topic sentence in something will bring to mind something that you did or said, and you'll have this reaction, and I don't realize that I've done it when I'm by myself, but then when I'm with Owen, we'll be kind of sitting in silence, or we'll be listening to something or just driving, and all of a sudden I'll go, ugh. And I didn't mean to say ugh out loud because I don't want to talk about the thing that I just thought of, but I said it out of reflex because I just am horrified by the memory of the thing. And then Owen will be like, what? And I'm like, nothing. And then, of course, you have to tell them, because when somebody says ugh out loud and then tries to say nothing, you're not leaving that alone. Let's be honest. I wouldn't leave it alone. I don't blame him for not leaving it alone, but I have that happen so often. And, what kills me is how many of the things that I'm embarrassed about now, at the time, I was doing in an attempt to be more likable or save myself from embarrassment. And in fact, I wound up having sort of the opposite effect, and I didn't understand at the time that's what I was doing to myself. And yeah, so I just, overall, the theme of this episode is, it's just what's going on with Rebecca is a heightened version of what I think a lot of us feel is happening sometimes when we have gone through something embarrassing or especially I think those who have larger friend groups. I'm not somebody who has really gone through that sort of thing because I've never had until recently a group of friends who all sort of knew each other and that there was like social stuff organized around them as a group. But I know for myself, when it's something that's like maybe on the podcast, I think about it sometimes that's just out there forever now. And I can't take that back. And I mean, I could if I like went and tracked down exactly when I said it and edited it out of the episode or whatever, but I'm not gonna. And I have a fear sometimes of somebody like, if the podcast were like suddenly to blow up and become really popular, that somebody's going to dig into old episodes and find problematic shit that I said and just cut and paste it all together. And it'll turn into like this situation that Rebecca has where it's all shit that I actually didn't said. It's all shit that was like, that is guilty as charged, but also it's not exactly fair or like a like representation of a whole person. It's just like the worst things about them. Which, you know, that's always the way when it comes to online presences and it's easy to boil people down to major events or things that are particularly shocking. And I'm not even like that mad that people do that or would do that to me. It's frustrating, but I'm as guilty as anybody about it. And that's sort of what I think Rebecca's really feeling when she's reading the comments and becoming more and more afraid to leave the house, is she knows that what people are talking about happened. Everything they're saying is true. And I think she's aware that were she in their position, she'd probably be commenting in similar ways about stuff that she's experienced with the person in question. And so a part of her gets it. And that's the worst place to be when you are like wanting to be defensive and you can't quite even muster it up because you really understand the other person's perspective as much as it hurts you, you know? So I'm going to talk about this episode from beginning to end, in unusual fashion. First of all, we get the new theme song, Meet Rebecca. It's sort of a weird theme song. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. It may grow on me. I don't know if it will be this exact same one every time, but it feels like a kind of joke that really only works the once. And I don't know if every episode starting with this theme song is really going to like make sense. Do you know what I mean? I just don't think you're going to get much better than the season 2 theme song, which is just so concise and so simply done. And I actually didn't even notice that the first episode of this season had no theme song at the time. I think it was like later when I was talking about it, or maybe even after that I was kind of like, oh, I don't think that we heard the new theme song for this season yet. And so yeah, it's the Meet Rebecca, and there's this other like random girl that they're filming, and then they realize that that's the wrong Rebecca and move over to our Rebecca, who is sort of sardonically like smiling at the camera and waving. And as they begin to realize that she's kind of a mess, that she's not really as easy to cheer for as they would like. And they back off and they're like, so we're just going to go back to the other Rebecca. And the whole song sounds really similar to sort of like a, God, what would you say? Like a almost Babysitter's Club sort of sound, you know, like that 90s. I'm thinking Babysitter's Club. There was another song that it reminded me of. But yeah, so I liked like the idea of it, but I liked it as in terms of like starting off the season with this, not really as the theme song before every single episode. So this is her, she's decorating for Halloween. As soon as I saw that, I got very excited because it's just, like I said, they never had a Halloween episode before. she's filling a bowl with candy corns and hanging a little spider and putting all these little, what are they called? Those adhesive things on the mirror. Remember those that it was just like you could not have a classroom in elementary school without there being those like laminate things on the windows and whatever. And then her doorbell rings and it's this like really elaborate like Halloween sound effect. And Paula's there and she has a really weird look on her face and asks her, "Have you been online today?" And Rebecca immediately is like, oh God. So Paula shows her on the Daily Covina, "Rooftop killer set free despite history of mental instability and stalking." Why is this woman walking the streets of West Covina? And there is it's byline. It says by Ned Leckredd, which I have to imagine that's a bit of a joke on Lex credibility. I don't know Ned and if it's just for the rhyme of it. Rebecca Bunch's I'm reading it because I have it paused there. "Recent release from jail strikes me as a disservice not only to our town but also our community. Violent delights have violent ends, and the rooftop killer's most recent victim will surely not be her last. Since she first arrived in our formerly peaceful town of West Covina, Rebecca Bunch has had insidious intent, namely to stalk Josh Chan, most notable for being homecoming king in both 2006 and 2007. Not many talk about how monumental such an achievement is. In such pursuits, our rooftop killer committed a series of petty crimes she never assumed responsibility for, earning her the moniker, 'She who must not be blamed among me and my 6 Afghan hounds.' As a self-described investigative journalist, I've been following Bunch's story for some time now and have uncovered some gruesome truths about her past, leading me toward the thesis of my argument: lock up the rooftop killer. But first, I'd like to take a brief interlude to extend a thank you to the Daily Covina for letting me publish my very first scathing editorial." So, guys, this has to be, I mean, we don't find out who wrote it. There's like the suggestion later on that what's his face in the, oh my God, Patton Oswalt. He says that he's the editor, but I have to assume that this was what's his face that she attempted to kill, right? I don't know that's got to be a fake byline. Like, it's too perfect. The timing of the whole thing, they know too much. And it just feels really targeted in a way to like come at her. I don't know. Maybe it's somebody from The Office because what's his face stopped showing up. I think, Paula says later. Doesn't she say that George like just stopped coming in? I don't know. I feel like whoever wrote this, it's going to be a plot point. It's going to come to light because there's just no way this is a random thing and it's going to remain random and not spoken of at all. It could, but the show tends to take those kinds of opportunities to like make something look like it's just going to fall by the wayside and then circle back around and be like, no, actually, we're definitely going to do something with that. We're going to talk about that. We're going to address it. But we just had bigger fish to fry initially. So we'll circle back. So Rebecca initially, her reaction is pretty rational and like measured, where she's just like, this is just one person's opinion. It's shitty and it's embarrassing, but this is a lesson for me. I am trying to take responsibility in my life. And if people are going to find out about my past, that is part of what it means to take responsibility. So I'm going to put my big girl panties on and I'm going to cope with this and just kind of let it wash over me and move forward. And that really sounds good. And you can see that Paula's impressed. And then she begins to scroll down and look at the comments. And that is truly always a mistake. There's been only a handful of times in my life where the comments have been a gold mine, and you go in there and you're like, man, people can be really fucking funny. Most of the time, the comments were a bad idea. And I have seen more and more people posting things on like Instagram and YouTube with comments completely disabled. And I can't even blame them for that a little bit. Like, I have comments enabled for myself on YouTube for all of because everything that I post to Spreaker gets uploaded to YouTube automatically. And I can't tell you guys how many like borderline vicious comments I get from people who don't understand what Unspoiled even is. And so they like go to something thinking that it's like just an audio book. Like I'm just going to be reading the text from the chapters listed or whatever. And they'll just leave a post talking about how I need to stop talking about myself or whatever and keep reading and shut up. Things like that, where it's just like, I should disable the comments on it all. But honestly, figuring out how to do that on every single post was just such a headache. And I've left it up, and I'm like, whatever, people are going to be assholes, and I just have to fucking let them be assholes. But that's on, that's an easy thing to shrug off. Somebody, a random person is misunderstanding what's going on, and they leave a shitty, snarky comment on one of 1,000 posts I've made. It's not a bunch of people weighing in on my life and an article specifically about me. So the fact that Rebecca gets sucked into this to the point that she doesn't want to leave her house for several days, yeah, that feels fucking reasonable to me. I can't imagine. It's bad enough, the anxiety, when there's like a kind of confrontation or showdown or whatever you want to call it online. Like that's already gives me a pit in my stomach. But when it's something regarding where you live, the actual physical place that you occupy, with people in the town who will run into you and maybe recognize you, I can't imagine how much worse that is. That's a nightmare. Oh my God, just the thought of it is giving me anxiety right now. I would hate that so much. So the fact that she just sort of sits there in front of her computer obsessing over this and constantly refreshing in order to see the new comments, I don't feel any confidence that I wouldn't do the exact same thing. All the while knowing it's unhealthy, knowing that it's not helping me. It's not actually necessarily people are much more vicious online than they would be in person, but there's also the part of you that's yeah, well, online they post what they're actually thinking unfiltered in a lot of cases rather than softening it. So this is a more accurate depiction of how people feel about you. I just feel like this is out of a lot of the things that have gone on with Rebecca, it's one of the worst. There's still that 911 call when her apartment burned down where she's shitting in the backyard, which I feel like is technically worse, but we didn't actually see the fallout of that the way that we see this. We see the fallout in the office, people have, but there's not a sort of sense that everybody in town has seen it and they're all talking about it and they're all just aware of her. She goes to a party at the end of this episode and people recognize her. And that is something that you can just put down too, personally, as that was a particularly bad period in my life, a really bad night. I made poor choices and that was an isolated incident. And this is, again, a summary of her life for the past, I was going to say the past 3 years, but they talk also in the comments about the arson. So it goes beyond even being in West Covina, I'm trying to think still who could have written it, because the thing about Josh Chan and how he was a Homecoming King 2 years in a row being such an accomplishment that nobody talks about, that feels like a really particular kind of person would write that. And it feels like if Josh isn't going to be the one writing it, it's somebody that's like obsessed with him in a way, or it's being written to look that way. But I don't know, maybe it's not even important. I want to think it's important because personally, whoever wrote this, I just really I want their feet held to the fire because this is just such a shitty thing to do. And the details that they know feel like they have to be somebody that we've met on the show, but I can't keep getting hung up on it because I'm not just 100% sure that's actually going to matter. Okay, so we jump forward to 3 days from, and Heather forces her to close the computer. There's this whole running joke about how Heather really wants her to stop flushing her tampons. And there's like a kind of back and forth throughout the episode where Heather is like, she winds up being sort of vindicated in the end because there's a clog that like caused all of what seemed like ghostly activity caused by a wad of flushed tampons. I, for myself, absolutely flush my tampons. I will just say there have been places that I have lived or worked where that wasn't allowed because either the pipes were really bad or old and they couldn't stand up to it, or one place that I was staying, they had a septic system. And they just asked you to not flush toilet paper or tampons at all, which, let me tell you, is particularly gross. And I don't, like, it's the sort of thing that when Heather said, because Rebecca's like, I'll just wrap it in toilet paper and put it in the garbage to smell like you want, I guess. Heather says, or you could take out the garbage. And I'm like, I mean, that's not a good idea. But if you go through a couple tampons a day, which a lot of women do, you're not going to take out the garbage every time you have to change your tampon unless you are going and putting it in the like bin outside. Like, it's just a sort of a weird suggestion that I'm like, that's not entirely, unless she means like before it begins to smell, but like, they smell pretty much immediately. That's just sort of the way tampons work. So, weigh in is what I'm saying. You guys, do you flush your tampon? Do you feel the way that Heather does? Because I just feel like this is a little bit unreasonable to expect somebody to take the garbage out of the house every single time they change the tampon. That feels a little bit much. But clearly where they live, that plumbing can't withstand. So it is going to have to be a behavioral change based on where they live at least. And Heather reminds Rebecca of the fact that they have a scheduled, like, there's a screening of Hocus Pocus happening at the, I'm trying to think what the green, the park, what you would call it. And y'all, again, I love Hocus Pocus so much. It's so much fun. I am so excited about the fact that they actually got Najimi to do a little bit. It feels like something that they could have gotten via like Cameo or something. But Heather leaves before Rebecca and gets Najimi to like film a little video urging her to come. And it's such a shame because Rebecca clearly like wants to go. This is something that she's super excited about. But her anxiety over this whole event is just taken over her life. And so there's something really wonderful that she's missing out on because of it all. And it's just heartbreaking, you know? This is like if somebody had been going to go to like a screening of Home Alone for me, and they got Macaulay Culkin on there and they were like, hey, where are you? We're saving your spot. And then I just like didn't go because Rebecca keeps telling herself that she's got to go. But then we get the song. So she's looking at this video and it does motivate her. And she's like, okay, here we go. I am going to do this. She's right. it's go time bunch. And so it's Time to Seize the Day begins to play. And it's a very upbeat, sort of traditional sounding, like song from a musical. And it's in the spirit of like, put one foot in front of the other from Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Except it's always right before actually doing the thing. She gets sidetracked by something else. And by sidetracked, that makes it sound as if it's like a thing comes up that sort of pulls her attention away. But really what it is her finding ways to distract herself. It doesn't come up out of nowhere. She brings them up as a coping mechanism to find a way to stay in the house. And I really, really relate to this. Y'all, I don't think there's many of us who don't these days. Oh, Megan's in the chat. I'm sorry, Megan. I didn't even see you. Window clings. I think it's mostly gel clings now. Oh, yeah, they are gel. I was hoping to have this episode come up at Halloween, but I messed up the timing. Oh, but that's okay. I love Halloween any time of year. I always threw them away. I don't have a period anymore, so it's not an issue. Thanks, IUD. Jelly. My IUD was so painful, so I had it removed. But in the age of the internet, when everything is right at your fingertips, literally on your phone, in your pocket, pretty much all the time, any question that you have about anything that randomly pops into your head, you can Google and find the answer. And depending on the question, it will lead to a rabbit hole sometimes of the question that you ask doesn't have like a particular answer that's easy to summarize. Or depending on the nuances of the question in the first place, it may have a different answer than another phrasing of the question. And lo and behold, you get sucked into a thing. Or then you begin to be distracted by something that's like right in front of you. For example, her deciding that she's going to shop for a new refrigerator. Shopping for a thing is a particular bad one for me because especially lately, I have had a little bit more disposable income than I had in the past. In the past, I always had to wait for payday. Once a month I get paid, so it's really tricky. And so shopping was sort of like, I would do it, but I would always have to wait. So I would put something in my cart and then have to come back to it weeks later. Now, because I often have the disposable income to actually like pull the trigger on a purchase, I will think of, ooh, you know what? I've been meaning to get new spatulas. I've been meaning to get one of those cups that goes inside a mask to hold it away from your face so that you don't inhale your mask. I've been meaning to, like, all these little things that you think of throughout the day. And I will like sort of make a mental note, make a mental note, make a mental note, make a mental note for 3 weeks, constantly forgetting to get it. And then all of a sudden there'll be a day where I remember and I'm like, you know what? I have been putting off getting this thing. I'm going to do it. It's a simple thing. It shouldn't take long. 2 hours later, I still am like debating and reading reviews and whatever. This happened just like last week. We decided to get a new topper for our mattress. And it was literally 2 hours of me like pouring through the pros and cons of mattress toppers and the reviews of mattress toppers and videos of people pressing on mattress toppers to see which one was the cushiest mattress topper. I mean, yeah. And that's in the best of times when I had another thing to get done that I actually did want to do. If you've got like the option to distractedly online shop versus go out in public amongst people that you think will recognize and disparage you, there's no contest at all. Like the other thing doesn't stand a chance. So, this song is really relatable. All of the different things. She looks up facts on stingrays. She winds up getting into what I like to call a pornado, where you just masturbate for like hours and you like can't stop. It's like a procrastination is the other way I've heard it called. But I like pornado because procrastination is a very specific thing, which is definitely what she's doing now. I feel like pornado is more of like something that can sweep through periodically and you're just like, wow, I don't know what happened there, but Okay, hopefully that won't happen again for a while. So by the time she sort of comes out of her, like, what's the word I want? It's like a fog. It's a combo fog anxiety attack. It's really bad. It's by the time she does a spiral. Spiral is really the word I want. By the time she gets out of it, night's fallen. It's clear that she's like missed this little movie festival thing. And she is on a FaceTime call with Dr. Akopian. And Dr. Akopian invites her to come in at 9 a.m. and talk about what's going on. And this is a moment that I judged Akopian just a tiny bit, because the whole thing is that Rebecca is afraid to leave her house. And I know that Akopian's probably thinking this will help her because it'll be an appointment just to my place and back, and that will get her out and be a first step, and she doesn't have to see anybody else. But I really wanted Akopian to be like, how about we have a session now on Zoom or whatever the fuck they're using, FaceTime. And she doesn't suggest that, and unsurprisingly, Rebecca manages to find a way to get out of it. By find a way to get out of it, I mean she just ditches Akopian and stays home and doesn't let her know that she's not coming, which, pretty shitty. But I really wanted Dr. Akopian to realize like how serious this was and to be like, all right, you know what? Let's talk about this right now. Not that I'm saying she doesn't recognize the seriousness of the situation, but I think that she believes that getting Rebecca out of the house at all is going to be a lot simpler than it is, because she hasn't seen exactly what kind of meltdown she's been having. And what Rebecca winds up latching onto as a means of distracting herself is this weird thing. There's a noise as she's on the call. She tells Dr. Akopian, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. I'm sorry, I've got to go. She goes out into the main the main living room of the house. And there is a book in the middle of the floor called A Brief History of the Covinas. And it's open to a certain page. And the page is all about their house and a murder that happened there. So here's the thing. As much as all of the things that wind up following are clearly Rebecca coping with her own shame and this urge to stay hidden, this is a weird thing to have happen. And I don't entirely blame her for feeling a way about it. If a book just turns up open to the page about your house in the middle of the floor with nobody else anywhere near it, you can't tell me you're not going to feel that that is significant. It's a perfect thing for her to sink her teeth into right now, you know? So she interrupts, oh my God, Heather and Hector are talking about Hocus Pocus, and she asks him what his favorite part of the movie was. And he says when she sat on the vacuum like a broom, and Heather's so disappointed. And she says, that's a really boring choice. That's everyone's favorite part. And he looks so devastated that she's like disappointed in that. Oh, honestly, I don't know if you guys like have this sort of reaction to things. For me, those kinds of obvious jokes in a thing that I love, when somebody else mentions them, for me, I find that delightful. I'm like, I know, everybody talks about that part, and it wouldn't be a bad thing for me. I would be like, oh, that's one of my favorite stupid jokes, you know? And I found it really funny that Heather was just like, I thought you were going to be a little bit more hipster about it, boo. So this is when Rebecca comes running in, and she explains to them about the chapter that it was open to. So she explains, because they knew that people had been murdered here, but apparently just not the extent of it. A drug deal gone bad led to a shootout in a small ranch house in West Covina. 5 drug dealers were killed, along with a young woman, Devin Lee, a local college student with no prior criminal record, and who had the misfortune to be there buying meth. And this woman, she was shot in her stomach, and her intestines exploded, spraying fecal matter all over the walls. And it's one of those, like, perfect, because it's a super embarrassing way to die, right? Except that it's kind of not. I don't know about y'all, but if I were the ghost standing next to this bed while Rebecca's reading this thing, and she's like, see, that was so humiliating, I think I would be like, humiliating? I was gunned down. I'm not humiliated. It was a horrible thing that happened to me. What the fuck? And yet, the way that Rebecca's talking about it, like, this woman had all of these other accomplishments. She had other things in her life, but the only thing she's going to be remembered for, really, is that she bought meth, which apparently it was like a one-time thing. She had not bought it before. She wasn't an addict. She wasn't, and secondly, that she died this way with shit sprayed over the walls. Those are the 2 things that people are always going to remember. So on the one hand, I was kind of like, man, that is a harsh view to take of, like, how she's going to be seen, and calling it a humiliating way to die. But, like, the points that Rebecca's making about how other people will probably remember her, I was like, oh God, is that true? Like, I guess it would be, at least for strangers who didn't know her very well. I also wanted to mention, I have never heard the name Devin for a woman. I didn't even realize that it was a name like Dana that you could use for either sex. And so throughout this episode, I kept getting, like, confused for a second when she was talking about Devin, and then having to be like, oh, right, no, Devin, but it's a woman. So Rebecca decides that this is a signal that Devin is like sending out an appeal from beyond the veil to her to bring some peace to her life and give her some dignity that she has lacked since she was killed. And the person that she reaches out to support her in this is Valencia. Perfect choice. Of course it would be Valencia. Valencia later on says, I just wanted to be like Gwyneth. And that really rings true to me and makes total sense. But when it turns out that the occult shit looks like it might actually be real, she is very quick to want to wash her hands of it. Like, she was all about it until it seemed like this was legit, and then begins to regret it immediately. And so we have a couple of, like, weird things happen during the seance that she sets up with Rebecca to summon Devin's spirit and find out what's going on. And there are these really weird noises. Eventually, the table sort of, like, lifts off the floor and the lights go out. And Paula believes that Valencia set this all up. She thinks that Valencia is, like, kind of playing a Halloween prank on them, or doing something, like, just, trying to fool them maybe. And once they begin, like, Valencia is trying to tell her, I didn't do this. I couldn't tell whether Paula really believed her or not. I think that she did believe her because of how panicked Valencia seemed. And I think, in this universe, she's not supposed to be a good enough actress to pull off that kind of panic. But when the power comes back on, and Rebecca's computer makes a sound because it's been turned back on again, she decides that this means that Devin wants us to look at her Facebook profile. And when they check it out, it's the anniversary of her death. Apparently she was killed on Halloween. So she goes to bring Devin's grave flowers. And this is where they run into the Patton Oswalt character, who went on a date with Paula and tried to get her to pet a stingray. I'm just realizing that earlier Rebecca was looking up facts about stingrays, and then we have the, like, pet. Was it pet a stingray, or was it another? It was an aquatic animal of some kind. and we get the song Do the Cringe, which I think is one of my favorites so far of this show. Like, I love how it's on theme, sounding very much like a Monster Mash. I love how relevant the lyrics are, and that there's like a bunch of voices involved in it. It's not just a solo song or with a couple of backup singers. There's a bunch of people involved in it, and I feel like it works really well in the graveyard setting. I love their costumes, and I really wonder if you can like buy these, because they're wearing these sort of hoop skirts, but the hoops are made out of bones and skulls. And just overall, I feel like the way, if you told me about this, I feel like I wouldn't be able to like picture it working, but in the moment, I was just really impressed with it. I felt like it all came together extremely well. And I could see myself playing this song at Halloween next year. I really could. And when Rebecca's like in front of Devon's grave, she basically tells herself, really, it's time to let go. You know, like, it's easy to get stuck in the past and on what happened earlier in your life, but you can't keep doing that to yourself. And so that's her lesson to herself, of course. And then later on, we get the information from Heather that she talked to the landlord, and they explained about what was going on with the pipes, and that there was like a weird steam thing, and that's what caused the table to lift. And she thinks that this will set it all to rest, that there was nothing paranormal going on. Now we have a perfectly good explanation. And we have a back and forth between her and Paula, who are very much on the rational explanation side, and Rebecca and Valencia, who keep saying, well, I guess we'll never really know. Like, was it though? And when you have people in your life who are like that, it's like, and by like that, I mean like Rebecca and Valencia, there's just no point in arguing with them about it, because my mother is like this. She assigns meaning to everything. And to a point, there are times where I also assign meaning to things. I definitely can feel this way. I mean, the book opening when it did, and Rebecca finding it, to me, that is inexplicable. And that is something that I would definitely be caught up in, the concept of that having happened to me and that being meaningful. But when people believe in spirits and everything having meaning, trying to say, oh, there was a rational explanation for why that happened, doesn't really have any effect on them, because even if there is a reason for the physical event, that doesn't explain the timing of the event. So you could say, if you are a believer, that, yeah, okay, so there's the pipe explains how it levitated, but it levitated at the exact moment while we were doing the seance. And don't you think that coincidence is kind of crazy? And that's just a circular kind of logic that you can't argue with. And I really liked how the episode ended with them just kind of going back and forth. It's like, no, but we do know why. But do we though? I guess we will never know. And I just like 100% have been both people in that scenario. All right. So now I'm going to back up, and we're going to talk about Daryl. Daryl is having a lot of insecurity over the fact that he is raising Rebecca, whose name he has not changed, by the way. He's calling her Hebby. I'm going to need somebody to take this in hand, because that is not going to fly, sir. What are you doing? This is really Renesmee gone wrong. I didn't think you could do worse than Renesmee. Rebecca is so bad. I hate it. Ugh. So, he is at this like group get together with a bunch of other moms. And the thing that people like Daryl overlook is their interest and commitment to being a good parent is 80% of the battle won, right? People like Daryl, I think, don't realize how many parents there are in the world who literally don't give a fuck and wouldn't find out the information that he wouldn't be reaching out to people, wouldn't be going the extra mile the way that he always does. So he has this idea because of the people that he surrounds himself with. Like, obviously the mothers that he's like meeting with are also dedicated. So he seems to think that that's like average, but not really, dude. Like, you're in a pretty privileged position to be able to come to things like this and spend time with people who have the energy and the fucking the spare time to talk to you about what's going on and what they advise. And I love that the women are all pretty non-judgmental about his situation. It's like, from the friends that I've spoken with about stuff like this who have children, from what I hear, the community of mothers, on the internet at least, is really judgy. And you have to like sift through a lot of extremely opinionated, shitty people to get to a small tribe of reasonable folks that see things mostly the way that you also see them. I appreciated that he seems to have already found those people, and when he's like sharing his worries about some things, none of them are really like, that's ridiculous, you really don't have to worry about that. Nor are they like, yeah, no, this is the best way for sure, you should be doing it this way. They are very content to like sit back and let him figure it out and not really instruct him in any direction. And so he begins to get extremely like upset as they talk about the teethers that they're using, the blankets that they have. I think at one point, they bring up something else, and then one of the women begins to nurse her baby. And that is really when it comes to the fore that there's like only so much that he can pay for. And otherwise there's going to be like, I mean, it's a whole other, there's a whole bodily function that a female body is able to produce. Is that the word I want? Carry out? Accomplish? And he can't do that. There's no replacement for that other than formula, which he inherently sees as inferior. And that's a real hang up a lot of people have. I mean, there's so many things that there are purists about. Like breastfeeding versus bottle feeding is definitely one of them. And that can be just like, even when it's breast milk, if it's in a bottle, people will act like that's a different thing than coming straight from the breast, even if it's not formula. Then there's like, even before they're born, having a cesarean versus a vaginal birth. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people get really like agitated about. And he decides that he is going to look into buying breast milk online. There's like a black market industry, which not only is this like a true thing, but it's not just for parents. Apparently, bodybuilders are super duper into breast milk. And I don't know if it's like supposed to have a better, higher protein content or like a particularly optimum profile of like vitamins or what. But yeah, apparently bodybuilders will include breast milk in like protein shakes or use it to like, you know, put in their coffee kind of thing, which, ew, but sure. And he does this like thing on Halloween. His daughter goes to school dressed as Snailer Swift. Is that it? That's a very good joke. I liked it a lot. She says something about how there was a girl who came to school as Katy Berry last year and how bad her costume was. And then when we're at the office, Maya is dressed as Katy Berry. And I really enjoy how Maya isn't like awful, but she has a lot of tendencies that make you want to facepalm all the time. And he leaves Josh with the baby and goes to get this black market breast milk, immediately senses that something is off, as we hear later, and like gets in a fight. he has to get out of it with the cops and go and find the breast milk somewhere else, and then come home to a house that has no electricity and pack it all into the freezer in a complete panic. And once Josh sees all of this, he's like, so that's enough for about 6 months. And he says, no, it's about a week. And then I have to go and do all of this again. Yikes. And in this like moment of him being out all evening, other Josh, Chan, comes over with a koala costume that he saw that he thought would be so cute. And him and White Josh dress Hebby up as a koala. And poor Daryl misses the whole thing of his daughter's first Halloween in a really cute costume because he is so distracted with trying to be a perfect parent going out and getting this breast milk. And when his wife comes in to drop off their daughter, which, by the way, I fucking love his wife so much, can I just say? She comes in and she's wearing essentially lingerie. It's not even like a miniskirt. She's in straight up underwear. And I say, God bless her, because honestly, I think so much about how were I like able to go back in time, I would have continued to dress so much more revealing than I was. And I dressed pretty revealing back then anyway. I do not want to be like doing that shit now, but I wish that I had done more of it. And anytime I see a woman just like really going for it, I just admire the hell out of that. And I love that she's not trying to even pretend I'm dressed as sexy blank, blank, blank. She's just like, oh, I just took all the sexy things. I just decided to be sexy for Halloween. I was like, good for you, girl. So she comes home with their daughter and he's talking to his ex-wife about how, like, you know, she doesn't have allergies. She's really smart, you know, and maybe the way that you breastfed her is why. And she's like, yeah, or maybe it's that we're good parents, which I mean, isn't really fair in terms of allergies, but in terms of like intelligence, perhaps, or just like her personality being that of like a decent person. And then she admits to him, I only breastfed her for like a week because my nipples, as she puts it, were like raw steak. And I couldn't, which a lot of women I've heard that from, that like you will get so sore from being clamped down on like that. And so it turns out that their daughter was actually raised on formula more than breast milk in the end. And she tells him, like, so whatever you're doing with your child is pretty much going to be how it was with ours. And I think that because you are a good father, they will be fine. It won't be a problem. And his daughter especially is like, Dad, you're a really good father. Everybody loved my costume. Like, you are going to do well because you want to do well because you care so much. And it's a really sweet moment. I really, really like this. The whole thing with Daryl having a baby hasn't really engaged me last season, where it was like just him wanting this and the whole pregnancy thing. Like, it was fine, but it wasn't something that I was that invested in. But I thought that this storyline, out of all of the ones that related to his baby situation, this one was the one that I felt the most kinship with, because I can tend to like really overthink things myself, and in the overthinking miss what's actually important. And it's also like part of why I don't want to have children, because I know that I would be like this and obsess and overplan and just become a nightmare. So I felt a lot of affinity for Daryl in this storyline, where sometimes Daryl can feel like a bit of a mystery to me, or not even a mystery, but just kind of like just frustrating, you know? So I only have about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to talk very briefly about what's going on with Nathaniel. Because it turns out that after everything went wrong with him and Rebecca, and he bailed, he just stopped showing up to work for like a couple of weeks. And there's this like joke where Paula says, "Where have you been? George said you went death camping." And he says, "That's offensive. It's called concentration camping to get you focused." And I was like, oh my God, that is a really fucking good joke. Like, honestly, I cackled a little bit at that. That was a well done joke. It's like one of those like groans so terrible and offensive in its way, and just really like on point. And when he goes into the conference room, the guy whose name I'm forgetting, if you guys want to fill me in, I think Megan's the only one here right now. The guy who was from Rebecca's group therapy and who loaned her the money to buy the shares, he is there meeting with Nathaniel's father. And it turns out that he was asked to step in because he is like this silent partner and actually does have a law degree despite never practicing law, and fill in for Nathaniel, who completely dropped the ball and essentially like left things hanging. Like he missed a couple of court dates and generally was letting everyone down. So he came in to help. And I really kind of expected him to be aggressive about it. But instead, the way it goes, because Nathaniel goes and tracks down all of his like dirt and dirty laundry and goes to his father to try and oust this dude. And Bert, thank you, Megan. And his father's basically like, I knew all of this about him. That's why I brought him in, because I hoped it would shake you out of whatever bullshit you're going through, because I'm kind of sick of it. And there's this awful moment where Nathaniel says, wait, you care about me? And his father says, wow, I really did a number on you, didn't I? Which makes you think he's about to be like, of course I care about you. You're my son. And instead he says, I did a number on you, didn't I? I care about the firm. This is what matters. You've got to get your priorities straight. And it is awful. And I'm hopeful that Bert is going to wind up being the father figure that Nathaniel actually needs in his life, because his dad is clearly not going to do that. Because right now, Nathaniel is just really resentful, which is understandable. Bert changes the name of the firm and everything to Mountaintop, which is not like, it's nothing. It's I don't hate it, but it's also kind of like, what is this? And essentially tells Nathaniel, I'm not going anywhere. And it's not like I'm here to take control away from you, but I haven't had something like this to focus on in a long time. And to be honest, I'm enjoying myself and I like this work. And I have so many degrees that I haven't really been focused, and this has been working out for me. So I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep putting the work in, and you're just going to have to kind of get used to that. And it was an interesting like tone from him. I thought it was going to be much more him suddenly deciding that, oh, I have the advantage and I'm going to completely play that. And instead it felt a lot more personal. It wasn't the way that it was with Nathaniel when he came in and wanted to dominate for the sake of it. Bert feels like the guy who's like, this is a cool project actually. And I want to see it through. And I find that pretty interesting. You know, I'm interested to see where this goes. So, I think that's everything. I think I covered it all. But thank you again so much to you guys for listening. Thank you to Megan for commissioning this episode and hanging out in the chat with me. I appreciate you. I hope that you guys miss me and that you are enjoying these. And I'll be seeing you again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.